Good evening, this is Pineleaf Nils, and welcome to LOTRO Players News, where we take a look at the latest news in LOTRO, and here at LOTRO Players. And tonight we have with us Etheros,
Hey.
Draculetta,
Hey, everybody.
Draxwolf,
Hello.
and Andang.
Hey, everybody.
And today we don't have any major stories, but we will talk about a little hint that was given to us about the Bjornings. And who has something to say about that?
Probably a lot of people. But Drac wrote it.
Yeah.
Well, basically what it was, towards the end of Friday's Take the Hobbit to Isengard event, somebody asked the question if there was any more news or any hints or anything they could give us about the Bjornings. And Sapiens brought Aaron Campbell, of course, the executive producer, on. And he dropped this little nugget that they're mulling over the idea of the Bjorning to start at around level 50, and they will start in the Misty Mountains. Of course, this is all subject to change. They haven't firmly cemented anything at all, but they said that's kind of what they're mulling over at the moment. And I would assume the Players' Council would have a lot to say about this.
Yeah.
Right.
At first, I was not happy with this, but then I started to think about it. And if they're going to start them around the Misty Mountains, around level 50, they're probably not just going to, plop them down in the Misty Mountains and say, there you go, have fun. I would be surprised if they did that. I'm guessing there's going to be a starter zone and stuff like that. And so if you get a new starter zone in the Misty Mountains that is just designed for Bjornings, that would be amazing. Even if it's terrible, I'd still think it's amazing. Because, it's the Bjornings and you're getting a starter zone. The second major reason is that Bjornings shouldn't really be in Eriador. They should be on the other side of the Misty Mountains, which is where they'd be starting. And if they give some type of compelling reason for them to get involved in the War of the Ring, then they could actually tie it in somehow in their own story. And, at least make some kind of sense.
Well, I have a feeling that their homeland or that they're in is going to be overrun or something like that. By a major attack.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because there is a war going on over there.
Yeah, there is a war going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This sort of thing, having a class B just starting off a higher level than others, isn't unheard of in other MMOs.
It's very common, actually.
WoW have a Death Knight?
WoW has one. I can't think of other ones off the top of my head, but there's a lot of MMOs.
Has several.
DDO has several.
Has one as well.
That's another Turbine game. That's surprising. Yeah. That's a big deal. Okay. Wow.
So I guess I'm wondering. I mean, I don't know. I'm still on the fence about it. I think it kind of makes sense from a lore perspective. It does make sense from a lore perspective, and it makes sense from the perspective of getting people closer to the new content as they start a new character. But I think it kind of confuses some things. For example, are they going to then charge the same amount for this character as they do for the Warden and Runekeeper that start off at level 1 and get that much more content to go with the character? Or how does... I mean, there's a lot of little questions that still would be difficult, that haven't been answered yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not to mention class quests and deeds and all sorts of stuff now. And then there's the other question of if you give them, say, a certain amount of traits and things like that, does that increase the price? Or since they're starting at level 50, does that make up for the price of being the same? And, how does that work? There's so many pricing decisions and things like that. I'd be surprised if they... I mean, it is a new class that has... They've never had a new class that's been released during the free-to-play model. And so it could be expensive just because of that fact alone. The fact that they're releasing a new class and it's brand new for everyone.
There are a lot of things to take into account if you're putting it as a higher level, but there obviously are quite a few benefits too. Fredlis in the chat saying class quests, some of them they could skip. Some of the class armor sets and gear they would have to put in from just landscape quests, they could maybe skip. We don't know how the stats are going to work yet, of course, but even so, yeah, there are like some benefits so much they could just avoid having to do it all if they put it as a high level.
Yeah,
Which,
I think that it's as far as labor to reward goes, I think that it would be a win across the board, except for the fact that if they are starting at level 50 and they think that they have to create a new starter zone, that means that that's a lot more work actually that they'd have to do to create an entire new area. That being said,
course.
I'm wondering from a lore point of view if the only way they could get this class accepted is if it's had a starter zone in the Misty Mountains or on the other side.
I'm still maintaining that the existence of the Runekeeper renders that sort of lore discussion kind of
That's
pointless.
true, but I'm wondering how it works in the mind of the Tolkien estate.
Yeah, it's a different thing. There is something else, obviously, the problem with the level cap here is that obviously some people are going to want to start at level 1 and do all the star zones from the original starting areas. So, it's kind of, maybe they could have it be an option to start at level 50, but then that's twice the work they'd have to put into it, building that starter area and putting in all the quest gear and class quests and all that. Some of the text they'd have to change too, like when certain NPCs refer to you as your race. Obviously, that's a little thing, but they have to put it in so many other areas too. It's a lot of work.
Eliza Ernst from the chat says, charge more TP for half the leveling of a tomb? And that's a good point. Because while yes, you do get to skip ahead of a lot of the content, you're also missing a lot of the content. So you have to factor in what the goal of the player is and all that stuff. A lot to factor
assume
in.
it to be more expensive than the one Runekeeper simply because it's new.
Yeah, that's my main thing.
I suspect that anyone who's going to be playing a Bjorning has already experienced the lower level content.
I wouldn't. I mean, unless they put a gate on
not
it,
as a Bjorning.
I wouldn't. Because I'm thinking that a lot of people will come in and want to play the Bjorning, and that's their main draw. Because I guarantee you, Turbine's going to be marketing this thing. If they market anything from this year, it's going to be this. And I think that it's going to draw a lot of players in, and I think a lot of players will just start out playing a Bjorning if it's possible. They might gate it to where you have to have a level 50 character already, which would be cruel, I think, but I can understand.
Right.
Yeah, I would certainly prefer that they gave us the option. I always think more options for the players is better.
Yep.
I don't know that I expect them to do that just because of the resource constraints that we've talked about there. They're probably looking for a way to potentially streamline this release so that they can get it out this year. So, I mean, that's an interesting thing to consider. I would love to see them give us the option to start at 50 or 60. But also, if you want to roll a new tune at level 1, take it all the way through.
Yeah, but isn't that what all the other classes are for?
Yeah,
Well, I think you made the point earlier, Andy, that we've already experienced that content, but not as this type of character. It could be a totally game with different set of skills.
Yeah,
the only
that's true.
problem I have with that is, then again, to be the lore guy or to be the lore purist, you're not supposed to see a Bjorning in the Shire.
Exactly.
You're not
Or
supposed
even
to
Bree.
see a Bjorning in Bree.
Right.
Or anywhere near
one little
Rivendell.
point- Okay. I should make a note here that the iconic classes, which are the DDO classes that start at level 15, those are more expensive than the purchased classes that start at level 1.
What classes do you have to purchase? Oh, well, okay. Yeah, that makes
Because
sense.
the Artificer and the Druid have to be purchased.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Good research,
probably
Pine
true.
Leaf.
Thank you, Pine
Yes,
Leaf.
and I've seeing that I have purchased both of those classes. I know about them. The iconic ones, do cost more turbine points than those classes.
That makes. I would be surprised if it doesn't cost more money than the other ones, if nothing else, because it's newer. Even if you don't have the start at level 50. Anyway.
All right. So we will now head on to our next item, which is the Players Council has been announced.
Yay.
Oh boy, your enthusiasm is
Thelros is
Well,
rubbing
it's
off.
not really much to say
Yep.
other than we know who they are now.
Good luck to him.
Mhm.
Yep.
is have fun. You'll have a lot of work to do in order to
Yeah. I think
give your
the
opinions to Turbine.
biggest news out of this thing is that the NDA is no longer in existence for the 2013 council.
Yep, and there has been a thread, or at least one thread on the forums with people talking about their experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it'll be really interesting over, say, the next month to see what news comes out of the 2013 Players Council. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering, do current members that are on the 2014 council, is their 2013 NDA still removed? Or since they're still on the council, are they just saying, well, you really shouldn't be talking about it because you might leak something from this year?
That's a good question. I'm actually kind of surprised that they lifted the. I suppose they don't have much of a choice once they're off the Players Council, but
Yeah.
that seems like it would make it very difficult for them to talk about anything with the Players Council that's beyond a year out. If they're,
Yeah.
you know,
Really
I think,
difficult.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
feeling they
wondering.
didn't.
I'm wondering if they either didn't tell them or they have like a tiered NDA where it's just like, all right, we're telling the public that you have your NDA removed, but really you have like these few things for the future that you can't talk about.
I suspect that they didn't. That they decided not to talk to the Players Council about those things that are coming
Which
later this year.
begs the question, how far in advance do Players Council get to make decisions for Turbine? Or influence, or, give feedback? And I don't think that's something we'll ever know unless, the council will tell us that, hey, no, we really did get to hear about, say, Minas Tirith and do some things about that, or, even 2014, some of the places in Gondor. So, it'll be interesting.
All right, we will have to see. Anyone else have any comments on the new Players Council?
Good luck.
All right, good luck. And now we'll go to our store sales, which, of course, Draculetta, that's your section.
Free sample of the week is a Max Morale and Power Scroll times 5. You can use the coupon code POP9, and you get one of those per account, but you will get 5 scrolls to use, though.
Whoopee.
Yeah, exactly. Also, for a limited time through May 1st, the Steed of Bree is available in the store once again. And this week is all about legendary items, which kind of makes sense with the first stage symbols dropping. I can see why they did the sale. 25% off legendary slot unlocks, legendary tier upgrades, legacies, scroll of combination, and the relic removal scroll.
What a completely worthless sale.
The free sample is something you get from Hobbit peasants in the droves.
Yes, I have quite a number of them.
Hobbit peasants would be much more useful than presents, just saying.
You can set them to work doing
Exactly.
that's who's going to deliver it to you is the Hobbit peasants.
The Hobbit peasants deliver the presents.
All right. We'll go over it.
PK
We'll go-
Crichton from the chat says, anyone who visited Turbine has a separate NDA, and Krell says, members who overlapped the 2013 NDA, what was lifted doesn't apply. So it sounds like that the people that are still on the council don't have their NDA lifted, which makes sense, because, you'd get confused what was 2013 and what was 2014, and I can't even imagine.
Right. Yeah, things can go very wrong very quickly.
Yeah.
Right, let's go into our website news, and we'll begin with LOTRO Academy episode 93, Getting Around, which is all about travel and the various ways you could travel, from simply walking to buying special ports that can take you all over the place. And this was an episode that was suggested by the winner of the auction from the Child's Play event.
Yeah, I listened to this last night, and maybe I was tired, but the 2 hours felt like it went by amazingly quickly. I mean, this was a really good episode. I recommend everybody listen to it. Even if you know everything about travel, or even if you think you know everything about travel, I mean, it's just the commentary among the hosts this week was really good, so I recommend everybody listen to it.
All right. Very well. Any other comments about that episode?
Yeah, I guess I would just throw in that I was pretty impressed by the amount of information that was packed into that episode as well. Like
Yeah.
Anding said, it was 2 hours and it was full of information. There was no dead time in there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it does help that Brannick does like to edit his podcast, so therefore, any dead time that existed, he may have.
You're spoiling all the secrets, Pineley.
Yes.
The
All
magic
right.
despoiled.
Oh, the magic is spoiled. Then we'll go over to the Breaking of Isengard, fully voiced by Andang.
Yes, I voiced stuff, and people watched. For some reason.
What were your numbers like?
They're actually pretty good. The first episode's got over 500 views now, so doing good. I really enjoyed the Breaking of Isengard. If you're nowhere near the level for Breaking of Isengard, or if you just want to hear it voiced and play it in the background while you're working or doing homework or something, then I recommend listening to this. And, you know, if you don't like it, you can stop listening. But if you do like it, you can keep listening. So there you go.
All right, very well. And that will be over at Andang's PVMP Andang site.
Also
which
known
if
as a
you're
YouTube
listening to
channel.
this- What?
Also known as a YouTube channel.
Yes, it's a YouTube channel. All right. Lotro video highlights shaving sapiens.
Say that a
Oh,
couple
yes.
times fast.
Yes, we all remember that one, don't we?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago, but I think that it was just hilarious because you just see this hand, like, it doesn't even wait for his name to make it off the screen. It just, like, rises up and starts to shave his beard. And the whole episode, it's him fighting against getting hair in his mouth, and it's really funny.
Trying to talk and get shaved at the same time
Yep.
is very tricky.
Yeah, and and his fear about the shaving was pretty funny, where he's not sure what happened to his face, and it's pretty funny. I recommend everybody would watch it. I think it was probably their best idea and execution of one of these short dev videos.
Right. And then we'll go into our next one, which is another of Sidrit's Lotro outfits, and this time it is a dwarf of the Blue Mountains. So therefore, much of this takes place within the Thorns Hall area or other
Excellent. And
parts.
today I'd like to show you an outfit for
So
a
you
dwarf
can go
of
into
Blue
Thorns Hall,
Mountains.
and it's a fitting outfit if you're spending much of your time there. So anyone particularly like that outfit?
Yeah, it's a good outfit, but I mean, her video production quality is so great. Even if you don't like outfits or things like that, I recommend you watch it just for the cinematography, because she's actually, I believe, a film major or already graduated out of film, and she does a great job each and every episode. I highly recommend everybody watch it.
All right.
And
And
it shows good
Brax.
outfits.
Okay. All right. Brax, why is episode 8 of Brax Clan called Where's the Door?
That's a great question. Well, for one thing, the Brax clan hasn't been around for a while, and that's basically just because it's been so difficult to schedule time with my sons to play because we've been really busy doing other things. So that kind of ties into the title, which was when we started this episode, my son logged in and he was in the Forsaken Inn, and because we were doing Lone Land quests. And it had been so long since he played, he couldn't find the door to get out. He forgot how to get out of the Forsaken Inn. He was running down into the cellar and all over the place trying to figure out how to get out. And I was like, where are you going? And so he said, well, why don't you, or I think I said, why don't I lead us out of the Forsaken Inn, and then you can lead us to the quest after that. So
All right?
We also talked about some other latest and greatest things like update 13 difficulty being raised, which we didn't notice at the lower levels, but we were a little bit over leveled for that area. And we talked about the Bjornings and asked him what he thought about that idea and if he would like to roll one. And so you'll have to watch to see what he says to those questions.
All right, then.
Yeah, it
We'll
was
go
a
into
really
the
great
previous-
episode this week. I highly recommend everybody watch it. And it's been a long time since we've had a Brax clan, so I really recommend everybody watch it. It's just amazing. The father and son dynamic is great. And yeah, great job, Brax.
Yeah, thanks. He does all the work. He's the funny one.
Yeah, but you're the point man. You set him up for all the punchlines.
Right, you gotta set up every single one of those jokes. It takes a lot of work. Now we'll take
I don't know about a lot of
the
work.
next. Well, let's now go into Local Players Adventures, episode 12, Giant Evacuation, where we try to save some really crazy twins at the Fort of Brooklyn.
Why did
Yeah,
we
I
try to do
think
that
If
again?
we learned anything from that, it's if you're failing, it's because you weren't slapping them enough.
Yeah.
So you have to slap them enough times in order for that to work.
Mm-hmm. That's the way it goes. Or,
All
kill
right.
them.
Right.
Oh, well, yeah, I think healing might be more effective.
I think killing them off is much more effective.
It's more fun.
Sure you fail the skirmish, but I mean, whose goal is really to win the skirmish when Elrond's sons have an opportunity of dying?
Yeah, it's just like Zero Oka.
Exactly.
I love it.
No one ever really wants them to make it alive out of the instance.
Oh, boy. Some people have a completely different idea of what the goal is.
Well, sometimes you have to, Pineleaf. When people are that terrible, like
Right.
Sarah O'Cart and that cow.
Oh, yeah, we can't forget Bessie.
You can't forget that cow.
All right. Very well, then. Away from the LOTRO Players' Adventures and on to the Spring Racing Carnival, where Lily Kate announced a carnival all involving racing events going on from, what is the, May 17th. That's a Saturday.
Yep.
And it looks like an all-day event starting at 10 a.m. and going all the way until, well, we have the carnival concert at the end at 9 p.m.
There's a pretty funny picture most of the way down the article.
Yes, but they're doing this on, wait, isn't that Preakness Day?
Okay. You'd know more than I would, Pineleaf.
Yeah, I think that's the day of the Preakness. So you may need to take a break from it and watch a Triple Crown race, perhaps, if
Yeah,
you
but
may need to take a break.
A shirtless dwarf with a mask like that and his hands up in the air just wins hands down.
Just wins hands down.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that is a rather weird.
There's one
Mask.
person breathing fire, a person saying nanner nanner, and a dwarf with his hands in the air. You can't get much better, higher quality screenshots than that, Pineleaf.
Yes, and this includes a pair of horse races, and the rules for these horse races are given within our article.
This is a long article.
Yeah, it's a long
A lot
article,
of information.
so head over to there, and remember, it's for May 17th, which is in only 3 weeks.
Wow, May is coming along quick.
Yep. Next, we have Brax's pick of the week, and what is your pick this week?
I'm actually going to kind of give you a 2-for-1 this week. I felt a little bad because if anybody was listening last week, we had a lot of technical difficulties with the show, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Iogro's blog, and I got dropped before we got to this section. So I felt it was not real fair to Iogro, and it wasn't really fair to you guys either, since you didn't know what Ocho is, a he or she. Talks about how in the days of old, when we remember the old video games that a lot of folks started on, like Mario Brothers, the level of difficulty actually increased in the game as you went through the game. But when you got to the world of MMOs and RPGs, it's really interesting because the level of difficulty increases in the world at about the same rate that your abilities as a character increases. So does the level of difficulty actually rise as you move throughout the game, or is it just the same old thing over and over at a higher level? So it's kind of an interesting question. Their assertion over there is that there actually is no difficulty in the equation of MMOs unless you're actually like a raid leader who has to herd the cats of a raid, and then the difficulty really is more with the people in the raid than it is with the game itself. So being kind of a referee and a coach and everything else that goes with being a leader at any aspect of life. So I thought it was an interesting post. I don't think I completely necessarily agree with everything they say in it, but I thought it was something to think about, and an angle that we don't hear very often when we talk about MMOs.
Yeah, this is a good pick of the week.
Interesting thing you mentioned about the how older games it tends to get harder as the game goes on. It's kind of harder to compare that to MMOs because whereas those games they have a designated beginning and end, whereas MMOs they sort of go on and on and on. You can't really have it get progressively difficult, otherwise it would get to a point where it'd be almost impossible to play it. So in that sense, it's probably better. The way MMOs seem to do it now is it's really dependent on what kind of content you're doing. So the landscape will be consistently that difficulty, and then the next one, say, for example, skirmishes will always be that consistently level of difficulty. Obviously, it's going to change as we discussed last week, but generally that's the way it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I think there is something to be said about the level of difficulty for on-level content. Because as we've seen in LOTRO, the on-level content at the early game continued to be a fairly reasonable amount of difficulty involved there. And then prior to Update 13, the higher you got in the game, the less the difficulty was for on-level content. So it was interesting how that actually was kind of a curve as you leveled up in LOTRO for a while.
All right. Now we'll head on to our question of the week. Etheros, what puzzler do you have for us this time?
Right before we go into that, I did want to give the opportunity for Drac to address last week's question of the week about difficulty, if he wants to.
Actually, Brack should have his too, since he wasn't there for it.
Yeah, if you guys want to talk a
Thanks,
little bit
Igor.
about what you think of the difficulty, just in general, current balance.
Brax, you want to go first?
What was the question specifically?
Well, just give your general impressions.
Yeah,
of
just
it, I
give your
suppose.
general impressions
Something
where
to
you
have fun.
think the difficulty is compared to where you think it should be in LOTRO
Okay.
right now.
Landscape mobs, rather, from 85 to 95 have had their DPS doubled or tripled. And it's just landscape mobs too, so that would include all those in West Rohan and a couple in East Rohan. So if you were, say, questing in there now, which some people are, that's where you would find the major problems.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very possible because I only did the last part of the new epic and stuff with my hunter. So
Yeah, that was
And that's where
relatively simple, but I think that now that you mention it, there were some I don't want to say hard areas with the old balance in Helm's Deep, but there were some fairly difficult enemies, and so if those are as hard as some of the normal ones are, I can't even imagine what the difficulty must be like in those areas.
Drac?
Yeah, that's where I'm having the major of my problems now with my lore master is anything out in that area of Rohan is just killing me. But I did kind of find out, I think, why that was, and I have retraded a little bit, and I'm going back and I'm doing some deeds and stuff to kind of up up some traits, and it's a little better, but it's still really really hard. And I'm apparently in the minority because I'm saying they went way too far hard, and I made the mistake of saying something about that on the forums, and I got completely shredded and ripped apart. And I literally considered quitting everything because of the reaction that I got, names and stuff I was called for
Yeah,
stating my opinion.
and
That I think it's too hard. But
It's
as
And
yeah.
yeah, one of the things that I noticed on them that was weird is that I presume that the woodcutters in the ice guard section only get those glowy buffs on them if they're near another Earth. But these, they get those glowy buffs no matter what.
But yeah, I think if you kind of look at your traits a little bit and your
Yeah.
gear, the only part that I really really had a big problem with on my hunter has been below flooded Isengard, and then my lore master. I can't really tell you right now because I'm still kind of playing with it, but right now it's pretty difficult on my lore master right now.
Last question I would like to ask is, are you guys finding the content below 85 to be, because they obviously haven't changed the damage there, are you finding that to be still, or too difficult, or too easy still?
I haven't noticed any change other than it seems the mobs are hitting me a little harder.
Yeah, it seems to be a little bit better balanced to me.
That I think that is about where I kind of like my difficulty. It's hard, but it's not too hard, if that makes sense. I mean, it's not basically 2 hits and I'm dead. So
The only lower level content I've done is with the Brax clan, and so you can watch that yourself if you like. No, we didn't, but we didn't have a lot of trouble before. I never felt like it was overly easy at the lower levels. I'm talking level 20, 22, 23 is about where we were at, and it still felt about the same to me.
I mean, did you notice anything today on LOTRO players of interest? I mean, I noticed, especially when we got down with those trolls, they were kind of hitting pretty hard, but I didn't notice it being, like screaming difficult.
Well,
Yeah, I
seeing
mean,
the number
I
of people
was-
we had.
Well, yeah, of course.
I mean, I was running around pulling them all, and it
Yeah.
took them a very long time to hit me that hard. Obviously, as a captain, I'm pretty heavily armored anyway, but yeah, it didn't seem overly difficult in terms of the damage they were doing.
But from what I understand, it's basically 85 plus is where all the major changes were laid.
Mainly, yeah.
Except in that might explain why on the skirmishes, I noticed 85 plus, they seem to have one level of bonus that they gave at the lower levels, which is higher than they gave at the upper level.
These are just going to be general questions. Feel free to be as elaborate as you like, or not, with regards to Pineleaf. The first question is just generally, what are your thoughts on how the epic story has progressed since the game launched, or since you started playing it, versus from Volume 1 all the way up to this end of Volume 3? Ando.
I think that the epic story got really good with the end of Volume 1. I think that was their original story, so they were able to push that to its limits, and that's kind of the thing that they started out with LOTRO. And then I think they went into the second round of their story, which they didn't have created, or even written out, created at the time of when they were working on Volume 1 at least. And so I think that it's not as strong except for their villain. Their villain is really good in that. And then Volume 3, we see a return and we see a recovery, I guess you could say, from Volume 2, and I think getting back to more what the core of the epic story is, but I think it still wasn't quite as good as Volume 1 was, in my opinion.
And moving on to Volume 3.
That's why I said Volume 3 is not quite as good as Volume 1.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Volume 2, that's my bad.
Yep.
Okay. Brax?
Well, I like each volume individually, and I think they do a good job of creating a very large overarching arc of a story that they conclude very nicely at the very end. I think I would like to see perhaps a little bit more of a tie-in from one volume to another, just to maintain some more consistency. I know they brought the Rangers back for Volume 3 that were in Volume 1. That was kind of a nice touch there. But other than that, it seems like they're very distinct and separate stories as opposed to kind of a single game that you're playing all the way through. And that's not really a criticism because they do a really good job of it. But I guess I would like just a few more tie-ins here and there to keep the entirety of the story feeling like a single book.
Okay. Drac?
I really liked Volume 1. I thought Volume 2 kind of dragged a little bit. Volume 3, they kind of picked it up, but I think it lasted way too long.
Okay.
In just real quick, Jack, do you mean in terms of like real world time or the actual book? Or both?
Both, I think.
Okay.
I kind of feel it could have, like, in game wise, I think we could have ended it sooner, but I kind of understand why they did it the way they did it, I guess. Looking at it now that it's finished, I can see, oh yeah, that's why they did that, and I think they did tie it all together well at the end, but I just think it lasted a little bit too long.
Okay. Punish.
Well, I noticed that every single one of the volumes seems to have its own level of the preposterous. Meaning, in volume one, you had a very strong story that requires you to travel to places in a speed that would require technology that does not exist in the time of this of the storyline.
It's called suspension of disbelief.
Oh yes, and you have a powerful enough story where you are willing to suspend your disbelief, and just saying, "Oh yes, I can easily get from all the way up to Angmar, then to Rivendell, then back to Angmar, then to Rivendell, then the Foreshells, then to the Trolls." And bouncing all over the place like this. And of course, they had this huge map during that time that they were trying to cover because they wanted to hit every single zone. So I can understand why they did that. But yes, the travel things that people complain about the travel in Volume 1. Part of it is because of the preposterous nature of all these places you have to go to. In Volume 2, the preposterous nature I consider that to be is in how some people mention, of the elves and what they want to do in Book 9, and the hubris of the dwarves in the first place, that they can, with such a small group, retake Moria. And of course, there's a reason why they, well, let's face it, ultimately fail, because according to the lore, they don't succeed until the Fourth Age.
Mm-hmm.
And even the people at Turbine acknowledge, yes, of course, this is a failed attempt. And you can see in the Battle of the 21st Hall that, it's like they're in a hopeless case situation here. And we only hope that they're smart enough to eventually leave before they all get killed off. And so the entire thing of the dwarves bringing such a small army in order to try to, in the middle of a war, trying to retake Moria seems rather strange. And of course, the elves, the way they act in Book 9 in trying to want to make as someone here mentioned before the show, trying to make a deal with the most evil person in the entire world, who is notorious for breaking contracts and backstabbing. And you think you're going to trust this person to honor a deal? And then in Volume 3, that the pacing of Volume 3, at least from the point of view of the Grey Company, is utterly preposterous in that they decided that the Grey Company did not start to be even gathered until the Fellowship left Lothlorien, in my opinion, more steady pace down there, and I think that steady pace would have been with a lot less incident than.
3 during Volume 2? So have 2 volumes going at once?
Of course, Book 9 does not start until February 17th, or at least until after the company has left, because the entire point of there was for the company are there, and of course Frodo.
At the same time, if it meant they were more accurate to the lore.
Well, then that has an entire. I'm just saying is that it's just interesting that when you examine each volume individually, you can understand why they made the design.
Pineleaf, I'm
Yeah.
sorry I said you weren't going to be elaborate.
He's actually got some opinion tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
What
Bring
happened
it,
to Pineleaf?
Geez, now I have to follow that up.
Maybe you should read
Creeps all over
Friendless's
again.
first.
Well, for me, I do like that each volume has its own sort of the way they make it. Like Volume 1 has you kind of tour each zone and spend like a book there, more or less, until later on, obviously. And then Volume 2 has its thing where it's just generally helping the dwarves in Moria, and then you go out and do other things, and then you go back. And then Volume 3 is just sort of it's different in that you have a company you go with, you journey with a group of people instead of being sent places, which you only were in Volume 1, or just going around on your own will in Volume 2. I mean, there's not much I can say to it at this point because the other questions are going to be covering it. But just generally, yeah, I do like that each one has its own style, that they each have their own qualities and certain things I don't like about them. But generally, I do like that they put so much effort into making them different from each other. Okay, the next few questions here are...
Wait, what about Friendless's opinions?
Oh, yeah, of course. You can say that, Pineleaf, since you spoke up.
Oh, very well. Friendless replied to us with the nice elaborate ones. He gave us answers to each question, and his answer to the first is, the Epic Quests are a shining jewel of LOTRO when it launched. I'm not aware of any other MMO games at that time that has such a heroic thread running through them, although they seem more common in games I've played since then. I think the biggest change is that they were originally designed with lots of quests intended for a full fellowship of players. But the story has become much more personal over the past couple of years, to the point that they can only be attempted solo now. This probably benefits the playstyle of the majority of the players and allows the designers to more easily control and customize what happens in scripted encounters.
The point he makes about that they kind of changed it from being a fellowship team effort to more personal is something I did notice a lot with Volume 3. Not so much with Volume 2, because they kind of modded it after it was made. But definitely with Volume 3, they changed this. The point he makes about they can only be done solo now, I kind of noticed a few tags on certain instances you do that you can only do on your own. I didn't really notice them so much in West Rohan and with this recent book, though. I'm not sure if anyone else noticed that tag.
Yeah, they seem to be moving away with that from Helm's Deep, but in Riders of Rohan and I think Isengard, there were major issues where it seemed like almost every other quest required you to be solo. I mean, there was some major...
Rise of Isengard was a main one with that, I think. That was really where it was at its height.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, I noticed that, but there was a lot of story they were trying to cover. It's usually when they're trying to cover story type things where that happens. Now, there were 2 quests in Enedwythe that were actually designed for a fellowship, but when they first released it, had the inspiration bonus. So that was... But I think those were the last instances that were in there that required a fellowship in order to... Well, it actually didn't require it because it gave you inspiration if you didn't, but that recommended a fellowship to do.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys think that they changed to becoming a more personal story rather than a overarching epic, huge battle type thing that they did more with Volume 1? Do you think that is a good way to do it? Or just a different way that both are equally valid?
Well, I have a feeling 4 is going to be more epic than 3, but that's
We can hope.
Considering the things that are coming up. Yeah.
And the things that they're saying to hype it up.
yeah.
Okay then. The questions that are coming up now are going to be based on your preferred or your favorite aspects of whatever volume you think did the best in that aspect. Feel free to be as broad in your explanations as possible. So if you didn't like that sin volume for that aspect, say so, and etc. So the first question here is, which volume do you think had the most interesting characters, or least interesting, for each one? Let's go in reverse then, Pineleaf.
All right, which volumes do I feel had the most interesting characters? If we go through all of them, let's face it, as many have pointed out, Volume 2 seems to be a little shaky on characterization. But I will say that the most powerful ones you run into are the interactions of the various characters in Volume 1, where you have this interplay between a villain, someone related to the villain, how the whole thing plays a part, why they are doing it, because you're not only going into on who the characters are and what they're doing, but the psychology of what you're doing is also being explained all throughout here. And you have the Dark Numenarian, for example, that you go into there and how he tries.
Fredulous, and I would say the best develop or interesting characters, I should say, is the second half of Volume 1. I just absolutely love that whole Golbadir, Namalith, that whole quest line, storyline is just amazing. And I think that is my favorite storyline in the epic period. And then I'm going to add a second one that I do like a lot, and I think I am in the minority when I say this. I really like Nona as a character.
I like her as well.
I'm really interested to see what they're going to do with her in Volume 4.
Yeah. It's always tricky with Volume 3 because you're meeting so many characters which, if you're familiar with some of the lore, you know their final fate.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Which makes it kind of hard to get attached there.
Yeah.
Brax.
Yeah, I've actually, in listening to you guys, I think I've changed my answer.
Ooh.
Because, well, here's the thing. Because I reread the question, and it does say the most interesting characters. And I would have to agree with Fredulous and what you guys have said so far in that the Volume 1 characters are probably the most interesting and the most complex. That being said, the characters that I feel like I know better and can relate to more and enjoy being around are those that are in Volume 3. I like the Grey Company, even though they send me on all kinds of stupid quests that they can't do themselves. And I like Horn and Nona and Kuradin. I think that having that persistent group of folks take you along the epic ride is kind of nice because you get to learn a little bit more about them with every quest hub and a little bit more about their backstory and their motivations and things like that. So, I mean, I think that was interesting. And I'm actually a little bit, we went into this last week a little bit. I didn't give my opinion. I'm a little disappointed to hear that they're not going to do that as much in Volume 4. So, because I liked the way that worked.
Ending.
Yeah, well, I think that Volume 1 has the most interesting storyline, but I don't know necessarily. I mean, character-wise, they do have a lot of surprise characters and characters that we didn't expect that they were, but I don't know if that necessarily makes the character more interesting in and of themselves, or if that's just more like the story had a surprise twist in it. I think that's kind of hard to separate. But as far as the sheer number of most interesting characters, I think Volume 3 wins hands down. As far as the most interesting characters, I think Volume 1 does have a strength still. in the second half. But you have to keep in mind that while yes, it does have the most interesting characters, I think overall it doesn't, because of the beginning of Volume 1, where basically all they do is play on the fact that you know the Fellowship and you know a couple of Rangers and you're going to just interact with them and that'll be good enough. You don't really need any character development that much, even though it does set up stuff way later on in the epic, kind of, with a few of those quests. But I think in general, if you took all the characters from Volume 1 and all the characters from Volume 3 wins hands down as far as more interesting characters. So I think it kind of depends on if you're talking about like the most interesting characters. Well, I think those definitely come from Volume 1, but if you're talking overall, I think it's Volume 3.
Interesting. For me, I can kind of see what you mean by Volume 1. Narmaleth's whole storyline there is probably the most interesting character story arc in the epic story, because it has a good conclusion, a good start, and you can see how it kind of develops as you go through the epic there. I would also agree with Andy, actually, that it's also a problem because it's one of the few interesting character arcs in Volume 1. I think maybe her and Golodir, and obviously her father, Leden, are really the only interesting characters in the entire Volume 1. The first half or so is kind of just playing on the books, doing quests with Gimli and Legolas. We already know those characters, so they're not really that amazingly interesting, not unique. Volume 2 kind of had its problem where it didn't have that many characters that stood out to me. Some of the dwarves were okay. Their intelligence was kind of questionable. But I think the only major character I really liked was actually Mazog. Partly because it was the first time we really had an evil character that's kind of, I wouldn't say comic relief, but he had a sense of humor.
I think he's way more even beyond comic relief. He had a
Mordred
huge
was
sense
a
of
good
humor.
villain, but Mordred was interesting, and Mordred was kind of meh for me. But Mazog, he's just so funny despite being an orc, and it's just his personality and the way he talks, the way they write his dialogue and all that stuff. It's just great to actually just anytime he was in the scenes and instances and all that stuff, it was just pure gold for me, him being there.
Yeah, I liked him too.
Again, it's kind of the same problem as Volume 1, where you have very few interesting characters there. It's mainly just him. Volume 3, I think, doesn't really have any characters that come quite to that level as Narmaleth or Mazog, but they do have quite a lot of interesting characters. Horn and Nona, obviously, the main ones for the latter half of Volume 3, but a couple of the Grey Company kind of stand out. Halbrad kind of develops a fair amount, considering he is the leader of the Grey Company. Also, Golodir continues his arc, in a sense. He shows he hasn't quite gotten over stuff that happened in Volume 1, so that's kind of a progression. And one of the few cases you see of something from Volume 1 carrying on into the later volumes. Also, probably my favourite ranger being Lothrandir, who ends up being, spoilers, by the way, he ends up getting captured by Saruman, and that is an entire story that I really like. I just liked him for the fact that he wasn't a complete idiot, unlike pretty much every other ranger there was. But also his thing tying into, I can't remember her name, but the woman who doesn't have one. That is a very interesting character arc, actually, and probably one of the more longer-lasting ones, considering how long ago it started. One I really did like.
Especially since that's a character that was introduced outside of the epic and then joined the epic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Horn and Nona's obviously their kind of arc going on. I did like too. I could see why some people would get tired of it, but for me, I enjoyed it. Not as much. It wasn't the great quantity as well as a quality. Just not quite the peak on any single character. Which volume do you feel had the most interesting storyline as a whole? Andang.
I think that it was probably the third volume. I mean, you can't really... I don't know. First volume had really good stuff too. I'm still kind of going back and forth because I'm not sure how much is the fact that Volume 3 was so new and I just completed that and I've only gone one playthrough with it. And Volume 1 I've gone through several times. I think Volume 1 probably has the better story just because that's the story they started out with, and it's really hard to top yourself when you have that long of a run of a story. I mean, that's like the amount of time that it took them to create and go through that story is probably about 2 seasons of television as far as a release schedule. So I mean, it's quite a lot of content, and it's surprising if they can do better than Volume 1, I think. That being said, overall, Volume 1 is a little bit weak in, say, books 1 through 7, maybe. I mean, it has a really great story, better than Volume 2, but I think that it could definitely have been better. Whereas Volume 3, I think the start of it was probably the best start of any epic book. Especially when you have, spoiler alert, all those ghost rangers, and you're going around and looking and seeing where each one of them, where they are in the world, and you're going to have to go around and get them, and then you have to go around and get them, which isn't so fun, but it's cool that they showed that in that way, and I think that was, I don't know how, I mean, sure, Volume 1's closing was great, but I feel like at the same time, finally having the conclusion of the fall of Isengard and all that stuff, that's just amazing. So that's where the tough question comes into play, but I think that still the end of Volume 3 was probably better, in my opinion at least.
Okay. Brax.
Yes, this is a tough question. You are correct.
Thank you.
I'm tempted to agree with Krell in the chat room on this one and say that Volume 2, although there are some really, really annoying parts to that story, I think that's a pretty good story. I like the Volume 2 stuff. I think maybe the only thing that puts it ahead of Volume 3 for me is that they made epic battles a requirement for Volume 3 there at the
that's
end.
True.
So,
yeah.
I liked Volume 2 overall. I still read most of the quest text when I go through Volume 2 just because I think the dwarves are funny. And they do some stupid things. They try and retake Moria. You get laughed out of a room by a bunch of orcs, which is always a fun time. And then you go into Mirkwood, and then you join up with the elves, which are, and then you got this kind of racial thing going, a racial tension going on between the dwarves and elves, which is obviously there in Tolkien's books. So, I'm going to go with 2 on that. As far as the second part of your question, the introduction and conclusion, I'm going to agree with Andang. I like mustering the Grey Company at the beginning of Volume 3, and I like how they wrapped it up too. I'm Volume 3 all the way on that one.
Okay.
Real quick to clarify my position on Volume 2, I think that it had really great elements throughout. It's just that it had a dead zone in the middle, and it has, I think a lot of times people associate a lot of side quests with that epic because it's in the middle of Moria, and so there's some negativity towards that. And then having to go back into Moria is also a thing that I don't like. And then also there weren't as many characters that were key as there were in other volumes, I think.
There were also quite a few quests in the epic for Volume 2, at least the first few parts when you're in Moria, that are giving you menial tasks that lead towards more interesting things. That I'll cover in a future question, but that is part of it, I think, as well. Drac.
This is a very tough question, but I'm gonna say the second half of Volume 1. I still say is the most interesting story. And which volume had the best introduction / conclusion? Hands down, Volume 3. That's the easiest answer I think I can give. The first one I'm bouncing around between Volume 3, but I still say that second half of Volume 1 was amazing.
Okay. Punleaf.
All right. I want to take this from the point of view of the entire volume when I answer this, which is why I'm not going to say second half of Volume 1 is because you have an entire volume 1, and when you look at that from the entire volume as a whole, the first third of volume 1 is bouncy. And I know it's supposed to give you a feel of the mood or anything like this, but it doesn't feel like there's much cohesion to it. It's not until you start to get to Angmar where you start to get a cohesion. So it doesn't feel as strong as a story as a result of that. Now, volume 3, you're following two different companies. So you're following two different paths. So I think that if you were thinking it from the point of view of how Tolkien did, where you have the interleaving components of a story, I guess it could. I guess even Tolkien did that. But from the point of view of going through as a player in a game, where you're expecting a temporal progression, it feels a bit jarring there. So therefore, that leaves Volume 2, where you start out, you help to get the dwarves into Moria in the first place. You go through Moria, see what the dangers are, learn about the enemy there, and then work in order to try to capture the enemy and then go forth. And then you have, and concluding in volume 3, where you finally have the payoff at the end. And I think from a point of view of a cohesive story, volume 2 is the strongest.
Okay, that's interesting.
And that answers my introduction and conclusion also, because it goes in with the cohesiveness of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Fredulus says, in terms of storytelling, I think Volume 2 was the best. There was an excellent mix of exploration and adventure, and it was a perfect pace. Volume 2 had a clear beginning, middle, and end in Moria, Lothlorien, and Mirkwood. Neither of the other volumes had a narrative structure quite as strong, in my opinion. In addition to the skirmishes into the story allowed us to experience some of the exciting moments completely solo, all the way up to a raid of 12 players. Turbine has never quite matched the flexibility since then, even with epic battles, and so he seems to be pretty close to my opinion on the matter.
That's a good point. I hadn't even thought about the skirmishes. That makes 2 even more strong, in my opinion.
Well, if you like skirmishes.
If you like if you hate skirmishes, then I mean, if you think of skirmishes the same way that Draculetta thinks of epic battles,
You're even worse off, really, because there are a lot more skirmishes than epic battles.
Yep.
let's see, let's see how many there are 5 in Mirkwood plus 1 at the beginning of Volume 3.
3 in Moria.
Oh, that's right. That's right, because they weren't part of the original skirmish system, but yes, they were added later.
Mm-hmm. For me, Volume 1, as I think some of the people in here were saying, is doesn't really pick up until about halfway through, when you get into Angmar and you get into the whole Goladir, Lorniel, and onwards to Marthiel. It doesn't really pick up until then. I think it was Punty saying it kind of bounces until then. You just go to a zone and do stuff, and then you go to a different zone and do stuff. I mean, there's that thing where you chase the Nazgul, but it didn't really feel that strong to me. When you do get into it, the second half of Volume 1 is pretty exciting, although I do feel it kind of drags in about the Book 10, Book 11, like after the Evendim stuff, where you're kind of on the back foot and you're just chasing around, and it kind of felt like I was losing focus of what I was meant to be doing. I mean, even one of the quests there actually says you have nothing else to do now, you just throw yourself at the enemy. I don't think there's really a point where you should be doing that, even if it is like seeming as desperate as that. That said, the payoff for Volume 1 is very strong. The ending, conclusion, and all that stuff, it was very good, and I did enjoy it quite a lot. The introduction for Volume 1 is kind of meh to me. Maybe it's because I've done it so many times, but it's, even with the changes they did to it, I didn't really enjoy it that much. Now, Volume 2 had a interesting introduction where you're kind of doing a lot of menial tasks while getting this huge reveal of opening up Moria and going inside. They probably could have cut down a bit on the amount of stupid stuff they make you do, like carrying lunches and other such things. My problem with Volume 2 is that a lot of the quests you do there a kind of the story. There isn't much of it in volume 2, until you get into the part where the dwarves start losing, or until they get Ziegelberg, or when Boris found his last. That's like book 4, I believe. There really isn't much going on until then, and then after that, you kind of you meander around in Moria. You go back out into LOTRO, and then you go back into Moria again. And there's still not that strong a story until you get into the Mirkwood arc, which is exciting and fun and stupid, but exciting and fun. The conclusion there is pretty decent too. But I think overall, Volume 3 is the most consistent in quality of story. It just hasn't really peaked for me that much, except the conclusion with Update 13 and a few other areas that are more book-centric, like the Breaking of the Fellowship and other such things, and a certain thing happening in Dunland.
And that's my stance on it. Volume 1 has higher peaks, at least with its conclusion, but Volume 3 is more consistent. Volume 2, I just think, is kind of lacking overall.
The next question is about the design mechanics for the quests and the flow of the books across the volume. So this is just generally regarding the quests they have you do, and the instances you go in, and the way you go to this zone, do things, then you go to another zone, do things. How well that works, whether the excitement is sustained through that, or whether it's too much. So, Panif.
All right. First off, the instances that we'll first look at this from the point of view of instances. In that Volume 1, you have a ton of instances where they were designed for groups, but if you go in solo, you will get with inspiration. And I don't know, I just could never get the feel of inspiration. It always makes me overpowered instead of the right level, because it's impossible to make a instance that's equally balanced with all the classes. And therefore I won't say impossible, but it's challenging, let's say. And there were pre-existing instances when they were going back to making them soloable. So I never did. So the instances you run into in Volume 1, I just don't feel right on. In Volume 3, of course, you have this big conclusion with epic battles. So obviously, based on what I said earlier about Volume 2 and the fact that we've got skirmishes in Volume 2 as opposed to epic battles or inspiration, from the point of view of instances, I prefer Volume 2. The overall flow I just say that the bouncing in Volume 1 disrupts the flow for me. Volume 3 has a pretty good flow, except when you have this big, huge interruption in the middle that sends you over to the Great River. Though the pacing, assuming that you're determining flow as being different from pacing, because the pacing is rather slow, in my opinion, in Volume 3.
Really? I think there's parts that are slow, but I think overall it's pretty good.
Yeah, when I meant by flow and pacing, I'm not even sure how much of a difference there is between those. But if you want to elaborate on both, it's fine.
All right, now as for Freitalus, he said that it's hard for me to pick a favorite volume in terms of quest design. In Volume 1, it felt almost every chapter was something new and important to do, even if the mechanics weren't terribly exciting. Volume 3 introduced some fun mechanics, but many chapters felt like their only purpose was to move me from place to place. I think I'm going to stick with Volume 1. Its quests were most tightly integrated with the overall story in the region, and it really made me feel like a local hero by the end of each book. Yes, in that case, Volume 1 did tend to have stronger books as opposed to a stronger volume. In other words, the books tended to be more could stand by themselves a bit more than they did in the other ones. And that's probably why Volume 1 feels less integrated to me, is because the individual books were almost more individualistic.
For the first half, a lot more than the second, I think.
Yeah, but even... Okay, I will say that, yeah, it was even stronger in the first half than the second half.
Mhm. Okay. Brax.
Well, I guess I higher volume me directly into another group of quests in an adjacent. That's why I like the phasing of the.
Okay. And then.
Yeah, I think that Volume 3 by far had way better quest flow. And Volume 2, I think that you do jump around Moria a little bit too much at the beginning, and then also you have to go back into Moria again, which I don't like. I do wish, though, that Volume 3 had a little bit of return back to places we've gone, like in Dunland. I don't know if they could have had a good story to get us back there, but maybe even just have like side quests or an epilogue or something that takes us back to Dunland to see what the scenario is in Dunland. Now that Isengard,
They do have the interludes though.
Right, but
The
those
interludes is a good point.
those just look at the Rangers' point of view. They don't really look at the people of Dunland and that sort of thing. At least it seems they really just focus on, spoiler alert, the earthquake issue, and that's about it, I think. And I guess a little bit of one of the clans. Now that Isengard's fallen, I'd be very curious to find out what happens to Dunland, and they have a very small window for us to return there and find out without waiting until like after everything, and even then I doubt they'd go back. So that's just my little minor annoyance, is that they don't really show what happens now that Isengard's fallen in Dunland. I think that would be interesting. And what would be even more interesting is if, how they have the hop over the log thing, if they, kept that Dunland landscape and showed it without enemy orcs or something like that. I think that'd be interesting. But that'd take a lot of work.
Do you actually have a preference for which one did do the storyline? Not storyline, the design best though.
Yeah, Volume
Despite
3
that?
was way better despite that, but I think that would have just set it way over the top if it would have returned after the fact. As far as the interludes,
Right.
that was a great way not to have to travel there back and forth a bunch of times, but still find out little bits and pieces of what the Rangers were doing and remind you that, hey, the Rangers aren't just gone. They still do exist, and they're still trying to make their way here, just like you're trying to make your way through the battle.
Okay. Drac, if you're there.
Where are we at? Sorry.
Okay, the question we're on is which volume do you feel had the most enjoyable design in terms of the quests you're asked to do, instances involved therein, and the flow for the quests throughout the books and the volume?
Man, that's a tough question too. I kind of think, even though you're in Moria Volume 2, because I like the way they... No, actually, which one introduced the skirmishes? Was it Moria or Mirkwood that started
It was
that?
Mirkwood that started, but
in
now it is
yeah,
Moria technically.
Moria,
If you
okay.
play through now.
Okay, so it would be the Mirkwood section then, is because I really like the way that they brought the skirmishes into it.
Yeah.
The way they kind of float it and interwove it in, so it seemed like it was actually really part of the story and not just some other new mechanic they came up with and they had you to do.
Here's a question. Do you, outside of the epic story, do you play the one where you have the boss fight with the final boss very much, that skirmish?
Yes.
Battle in the Tower.
Okay, I don't really return to that one very much, just because I consider it so much involved with the epic, and you have to wait forever for that dialogue to finish.
Yeah. I do, but I really like that because I like the area that it's in. I like the design of the castle and everything because it has like a real, gothic-y type feel, so I really enjoy that one.
Yeah, one thing about their tower design, though, I wish it was more strategically viable. Because those kind
Well,
of
yeah,
stairs
yeah.
just on that one side, like, Helm's Deep is such a much more feasible design. But, that's a minor
Well,
side.
I have a feel it could be that the hubris of Sauron assumes that no one's ever going to really get that far.
So you don't need to build good structures because they won't ever get beyond the outer wall.
They're never going to see us, so we don't need to
Cost
spend
effective.
money. Yeah, exactly.
It
Don't
looks
need to
good
waste
on the
any more,
outside, but the inside is just cardboard and orcs.
Yeah, you can just tell it was contracted out. That's why.
Yep.
Oh goodness.
Okay. For me, I think Volume 1 had the better instances in terms of the ones we use, like, it's the quest instances, I mean. Like, the actual final ones where you go with Lorneal and Narmaleth, and ones where you go into fight and siege and attack people, and those felt more exciting to me than skirmishes. And every battle's a kind of different subject, but those they felt like there were a lot more of those exciting things than they were in Volume 2 and Volume 3.
Also,
Volume
boss
3
fights.
especially kind of slacked off on those.
Boss fights,
Yeah, but
especially in
it's got
Volume
that
1.
Yes, boss fights especially, yes.
Yeah.
Both Volume 2 and 3 were kind of lacking in that regard.
2 was better,
Yeah, the
but
problem is
3
you
was
don't
really
have-
lacking, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I felt kind of...
The problem I have though with that what you have in volume 1 is that most of them include you either do it in a group or you have inspiration, and you know how I feel about inspiration.
Yeah, inspiration it does make you overpowered, and it doesn't make it fun. Because a lot of the times the mobs just have so much health that you're not going to lose, but it's just going to take a very long time to win. And that's probably my main issue with it. It's just not exciting at all. That said, it is still exciting in certain ones. Despite how stupid Lorneal is, charging into Khan Doom and trying to rescue her father is very exciting for me to go through. There's very few places in Volume 3 that has that kind of excitement for me.
Yeah.
There are also the kind of more solemn ones. I think some like the remembrance ones where you put down stones for the graves of rangers who died in Volume 1, and there are also similar ones in Volume 2, and Volume 3 especially had a couple that I really remember. I think it was Book 6 had that dream sequence where Candide turns up and you look at you're dreaming, if you remember that. That was a really good, and that's probably my favorite quest instance in the entire epic in terms of that. Also the one where you're journeying down to Rohan, but you and your companions, you just stop and tell stories that you each have. That one I really like too. So I think Volume 1 had the better quest instances, but when you get onto Flow, it just falls apart. Volume 1, there's just so many problems I have with that. It's not just the fact that there's so much traveling between each book or even between each chapter, it's the fact that they send you back and forth so often. I mean, people like to joke about how Elrond, you get sent to him so often, but it really does happen way too much. Like, I remember at one point you're in Angmar, Gathforthnia, I believe, and there's something you need to be translated or something like that. So they send you to Elrond, you do a couple of things there, and then you go back in like 2 or 3 chapters, and that's it. They just could have cut out that, and it would have made the story more cohesive, and you wouldn't have felt like you've just been ripped out of the story temporarily.
Yeah, I think it's
And
volume.
very often.
I think it's volume 6. Because I was doing my playthrough, I cut out all the traveling, and if I remember right, it was literally like 3 hours of traveling, and that's with the use of swift travel and milestones and things like that, and well, including the quest and stuff, and only about half an hour of that 2 to 3 hours was actual like quests and content. The rest of it was just traveling. That's a lot of time of just traveling.
Yeah, and it gets even worse when you get into the later books. They did address this somewhat with previous updates, and obviously changes like mithril coin travel and things like that. But it is still pretty bad. We spending like a couple of chapters in one zone, then you're sped off to another one. It did really ruin the enjoyment of the actual story for me, and that's the main reason that I don't do Volume 1 anymore. It just, there's so much travel in it, kind of it's so time consuming to do. I can't do it anymore. Volume 2 is kind of bad in that regard too, though not to the same extent. At least when you're in Moria, they kind of send you on way far off places, and because Moria's map is odd compared to other places, it's kind of just as awkward to get to some of these. Not so much since the revamps, but before it was really bad.
True, but that epilogue, there's no excusing that thing. Volume 2.
You mean the epilogue that I ignore?
The
epilogue is a different cat.
I still have yet to finish that epilogue.
I finished it on one chapter, I think.
Don't mind the epilogue too much because it's kind of tying up loose ends. There are a couple that are really out of the way, and I thought, okay, that's a bit unnecessary. But then there are others that have you just complete instances, or like part of the Mirkwood quest pack and stuff like that, which is different. And I'm okay with that.
I remember one time, every time I killed an orc in a new region, I would type in Kinchant for the Greyhammers.
I think generally the interludes they've done since Waldemar, I believe, have been a lot better than the epilogue, though, because they put it where it makes sense. You know, like they have that map you interact with, or you talk to a certain person who has them. That is a lot better way of doing it. Plus the fact that it is very clearly an optional thing rather than the epilogue, which people have even now are debating whether it's technically part of the epic or not, and whether it should be soloable.
Yeah.
Volume 3, I think, has hands down the best quest flow in terms of the just like not being sent away and around too much. Maybe occasionally it does take it, like in Dunland, if you remember, they have quests that just send you to a place and that's it. That's what the quest is. Fredis was talking about that in his thing, I believe. That is kind of annoying in Dunland, but they do kind of back away from it occasionally. There is some in East Rohan and West Rohan too. But overall, I think Volume 3 does have the best, because the flow is that good compared to the other two, and there are quite a few touching quest instances, even though they aren't epic and challenging, which is more on the point of the change to a more personal storyline, which is fair enough. Okay, the last question here is, simply put, which volume do you think is the best or most enjoyable to you overall? They're taking everything into account. Andang.
Volume 3.
Okay.
Not going to expound upon it. Just no hands. Hands down, it is the best volume in my opinion, just because there's not as many points that I can think of are bad in general. In Volume 2, there's middle parts that aren't up to par with the rest of the story, I think. In Volume 1, I think the first half of the volume is not anywhere near up to par as the second half. Volume 3 is by far, it keeps quality up, and I think that's because they learned their lesson from Volume 2. And hopefully they'll continue to improve it and maybe even have a better line in Volume 4, but we can only hope.
Mm-hmm. So you did elaborate on it?
Yeah, because you asked me to.
Okay, Brax.
I'm going to say, because I value the efficiency of the quest flow so much, that Volume 3 is the best. Just because I don't have time, honestly. I don't have enough playtime to be sitting in front of my monitor watching the backside of my horse bob up and down all the way across Forakel. That just takes too much time out of my evening, and it's not. It may be enjoyable the first time because of the scenery, but after that, I've had enough of that. Yeah, but the other thing I wanted to say was, you also, with this question, the best overall, I'm going to put in quotes, is an interesting one, because on any given day, don't discount the power of nostalgia. I I actually have a lot of fun now going back with my boys doing the Brax Clan with the Volume 1 stuff because I can remember what I was doing 3 years ago and who I was playing with
Yeah.
and how difficult it was the first time and how I had no idea what to expect. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to go back and do some of those old things every once in a while just because of that nostalgia factor.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I
of course,
remember
it can go.
just because in
Sorry.
Volume 1, in the final, I don't know, whenever it starts being level 50, I was 45 on my champion. And some of those boss fights, particularly the later ones, are obnoxiously hard, because this was back when the balance was free-to-play balance, which was actually decent. And so doing a champion with that 5 levels above was actually really hard. And some of those mobs were more than 5 levels above me, and yet somehow I still made it through those fights. So nostalgia there is definitely really strong with Volume 1.
Of course, nostalgia can go the other way too. Like, I have a very strong memory of doing Volume 2 in Moria and doing those 3 where you have, with like the ones that got turned into skirmishes. Before they did that, I had to wait around for hours and hours just to get in a run of the Way of Smiths, the 21st Hall, the other one. It was torturous just doing. Literally, it took me ages to get them done. I think 1 or 2 of them I actually ended up having to wait for them to be converted to skirmishes just to do because no one else was doing them. I think that kind of soured my view of those.
Yeah,
Volume
Drums
1
of the
obviously
Deep
can do those.
was notorious for that.
Mm-hmm. Did you finish? Whoever was talking? 'Cause my memory's gone.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, Rex. Drac.
Volume 3, but I do say Volume 1 was very good, though. And it's that, like Brack said, it's that whole nostalgia feel for it, so.
Mm-hmm. Pineleaf.
All right, I'm going to base this answer on which one I am most often completing all the way through.
With which warden is the question, though?
No, listen to that. First, I mean how often because, for example, Volume 1, I have completed that 3 times, all in Wardens. I've never completed on another class, so I have this Runekeeper I'm leveling right now that might do the entirety of Volume 1. Actually, I don't think that character is doing it all. So, in other words, I've done it 3 times, and this first time I did it over level, the second time I did it making sure that I finished Volume 1 before I could even start Volume 2. In other words, I couldn't get a legendary item or anything like that before finishing Volume 1. And the other time was also at level, even though I was allowed to pick up the legendary item first. So I've done it 3 times overall, twice at level. But on all my other characters, I skip after book 6. I skip everything else. So therefore, we're dropping that one. Because if it were really, really great, I'd be doing it more often. Second, Volume 2. Book 8, I have done only 2, maybe 3 times. I think I've done it 3 times. Yeah, I've done Book 8 3 times on those same 3 characters that completed Volume 1. Also completed Book 8 of Volume 2. Usually I skip that one, and even Book 7 is notorious for me not always completing that one. So therefore I have 2 books that I skip, and I just skip from 6 to 9 is what I very often do. So therefore Volume 2 loses because I very often skip. In Volume 3, on all my characters, I've played it all the way through. So it wins best overall simply because I actually complete the volume on more characters. As for Fredulus, he says, it's hard to pick a favorite volume in terms of quest design. Volume 1, it felt almost like every chapter was something new and important to do, even if the mechanics weren't terribly exciting.
That's true.
Volume 3 introduced new and fun mechanics, but many chapters felt like only purpose was to move me from... Actually, didn't I just read that one already?
I don't know.
I
Pine
have
Leaf.
no idea.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's right. He only has 5 chapters, but there are 6
I did
questions. So
questions.
he did not answer the question I just gave. Okay. Never mind.
That's
Moving
my
on.
bad. Is there anything else you needed to add, Pineleaf?
No, that's it.
Congratulations,
Okay.
Pine Leaf. I think this is the most vocal you've been on anything. So thank you for showing up tonight because you definitely made the discussion.
You really showed me up. Okay. For me, I think overall, I do enjoy Volume 3 the most. Volume 1, if the second half wasn't so travel horrible, and I could just not do the first half, I would probably do that a lot more. But as it is, I basically don't do Volume 1 at all, except maybe Book 6 for access to Angmar. And if I was doing it in the Lore Master, which I won't, it would be for the Lore Master pet thingy. Other than that, I wouldn't do it. I have fond memories of Volume 1 from my first character, and a couple more after that. But that's where they're going to remain, just memories, not doing it again. Volume 2, I basically do up to Book 6, where you get out of Moria and you talk to Haldir. I do it there, and I stop. I might pick up Book 9 to go into Mirkwood, maybe on a character that's going to quest in Mirkwood, because it kind of flows better then. But I would definitely not take the book that puts you back into Moria. I just don't think it works well in terms of that flow. Volume 3, I think, is just the most consistent of quality. There are a lot of touching moments. It is more personal, and I kind of like that. Overall, I just enjoy that one a lot. So that's my pick. There was a last question here, which is more open-ended, and it's simply, what would you like to see in Volume 4 or not like to see in it? Start with Pineleaf.
All right, what would I like to see in Volume 4? Well, the initial answer, of course, is going to be obvious, but even though I don't think they're going to give me any, that's, of course, some skirmishes.
You don't think there's going to be any skirmishes in Volume 4?
Well, it seems like they haven't been putting in any late. I mean, I would love to be surprised on it and see some in there, but
weren't there ones in Volume 3 though? So the last 2 volumes have both had skirmishes.
The Volume 3 had one in the very first book.
Right. Yeah. I think we could see another thing like that maybe.
Yeah, if they can do it, all right. Yeah, I would really love to see some in there, and since that seems to be one of the best solutions to it, because I certainly don't want to see any more inspiration buffed instances, because I just don't like that solution for taking care of dungeons and trying to make them soloable, because I think it just somehow saps the fun out of it. And so therefore I would prefer that they use skirmishes rather than inspiration or epic battles. And yes, I know they are thinking of an epic battle to add, and there are probably going to be a couple of them, but hopefully there won't be too many.
But Pineleaf, as many people on the forums say, aren't epic battles just skirmishes?
Oh no, you didn't go there.
You did it now, Andang. You did it now.
It's sort of like taking anything good with skirmishes, throwing it out, and leaving.
That's the nice way of putting it.
The very nice way.
No, they are not skirmishes in any way, shape, or form, because skirmishes are fun.
All right, you hear that, forums people?
Forums people.
You feel like you're doing something in a skirmish. You don't feel like you're being pulled by the scruff of the neck.
I
You are
completely
in,
agree, Pine Leaf. I was just having a little fun.
Okay then.
All right. Now, as for Fredolus, he does
Here
have
we
an
go.
opinion on this. Looking forward to Volume 4. I hope Turbine is able to plan out a strong narrative structure in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess I do have to see his point in that. Although I've enjoyed interacting with Tolkien's Fellowship so closely at the end of Volume 3, I actually wouldn't mind putting some distance between us again. I didn't realize it until just now, but I really enjoy being part of my own story and not part of someone else's story whose ending I already know.
Mm-hmm.
I'd really like it if Turbine sent us off to our new adventures again, at least for a little while, like going down into southern Rohan. No, that last sentence was my own. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Drac.
What I would like to see, even though I know they have said there are none, is some new 3-man and 6-man instances. That would be good.
Tied to the epic.
Yes, but not epic battles. I do not want to see any more epic battles, but then again, even though I know there will be, because they claim there's going to be some, and I can hardly wait.
So, how would they tie these 3-man, 6-mans into an epic that is presumably still going to be completely soloable?
Well, see, that's the problem. Since they're trying to go this whole solofication thing, you're never going to see that again. But I would really like them to go back to that. Because I really enjoyed that, because that's about the time I started playing, is when, like you said, you had to sit there and wait forever to get a group to do, Way of Smiths. Because it wasn't a skirmish, you had to wait to get a group, and you could not do it solo. And I would like to see them go back to that, but I know they never will. And then I'm also, I guess, I don't know if this would be what I'd like to see, but I'm looking forward to seeing the storyline and what they do with Horn and Nona. Because we all know what's going to happen to Horn.
Oh, yeah.
But none of us know what's going to happen to Nona.
Exactly.
Because Nona's none ya business.
Been saving that one for a while, haven't you?
Only like 6 months.
Glad I could help out then.
It was the perfect time, Drac. Great job.
And things you wouldn't like to see, aside from epic battles?
Just epic battles, that's it. I loathe them with a seething hatred that's beyond all hatred.
The Mount Doom fires of Mount Doom have no compare to Drac's pure hatred, unadulterated by anything of epic battles.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. That sums it up.
Okay.
Just helping you out.
Drax.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
I am going to go out on a limb and disagree with Fredolus a little bit, which probably makes me wrong. It's kind of like disagreeing with Pine Leaf, isn't it? You just know you're going to be wrong.
Yeah, Krell, never disagree with Krell, Pine Leaf, and Fredolus. It's a bad idea.
But I am going to say I don't mind veering off the main storyline a little bit, but I think the strongest parts of Volume 3 are when we were interacting with the Fellowship and seeing parts of the books occur before our eyes. So I don't want to veer too far away from what's going on. Having said that, I've been kind of racking my brain trying to figure out how they're going to get us to witness both the Battle of Pelennor type stuff and the Sam and Frodo stuff that are happening simultaneously, because we had the same type of thing going on with Helm's Deep and the breaking of Isengard, and they handled it fairly well. But the breaking of Isengard isn't.
Here's the thing, Brax, is that every single update has had an epic story. The number has changed whenever that there's a epic story update. There has not been a single instance where a non-major number update has added epic story content, and I doubt that they'd break it with Frodo and Sam, especially considering they're on the other side of the world of where we're going to be probably. So I
see where you're
fully
going.
expect that to be a side quest.
You think Frodo
Because
and Sam
it
not going to
would,
be
well, it would
epic?
completely break their history if they made that be part of the epic story, if it is not going to be part of a major update, because they've never had a non-major update have epic story material. It's never happened in
Yeah,
the entire
that's.
history of LOTRO.
But okay, that's possible. But isn't the Frodo and Sam part where they throw the ring in the volcano? I think that's kind of important.
Yeah, I expect them to do the epic story on that part, but as far as this year, when they're not, nowhere near Mordor, they're just going to the Dead Marshes, I don't expect them to include it. But yeah, that could be part of Volume 4 later on, I suppose.
I also wanted to point out. I think it's kind of hilarious because us as players we're so schizophrenic about things. We talk about how we want to stay close, and we complain that they do it simultaneously. I hope they do something like that for some of the new epic as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. For me, I think the main thing I just want them to keep doing now is keep the flow working as it is, because that's the main thing I do like, is that you kind of you don't bounce around too much. I would like, I think Anna mentioned earlier in the show about going back to previous zones a bit more, maybe just see how things have progressed, if at all. But for the most part, I would like to keep things mostly as they are now in terms of that. I would like to see, because I know the producers I mentioned that our companions, Nona, Horn, and Rodan going off on their own, doing their own thing. I would like to at least have some estimate or at least some sort of hint of what they're doing. I don't want to have complete cut contact with them. The same with the Fellowship and book characters too. I mean, I like first thing. You wouldn't mind going a bit away from them for a while. I wouldn't mind that too much as long as it's not completely cut off like it was in Volume 3 in Dunlad and Energwife. Because that, I think people were a bit annoyed that, well, not so much annoyed, but disappointed that you didn't. There was quite a while where you're not interacting with any major book characters. As for what I would not want to see, well, I obviously said I don't mind epic battles too much. I wouldn't want them, and I wouldn't not want them either. If I get them, I'll do them, and I'll move on, and that's it. I wouldn't want it to be made forced grouping again, but I also wouldn't want it to be those you can only do this as solo. I'd want it to have as many options as possible. So things like in Volume 1 where you can do them as solo, not necessarily with the buff, which is obviously overpowered, but once you can do as solo or in a fellowship or in a 3-man or in a duo, more options the better for that. As long as they can obviously get the skilling right. Really, I'm just looking at stuff on the producers layer. I am quite optimistic for what Volume 4 is going to bring, so I'm not too worried about what it's going to be now.
All right.
And that's over to you, Prime.
All right. Thank you very much. Great questions this week. And now it is time for us to talk about donations. And this week, unfortunately, we did not receive any. But if you would like to help LOTRO players, simply go to the donations page where you can help support the podcast of LOTRO players and also help the site. We have $5 and $10 mentions where you can donate and get a mention on one or all of our podcasts for an episode depending on the amount. For $5, you get a mention on the podcast of your choice. $10 or more, you get a mention on all of our current active podcasts. We did not receive any iTunes reviews this week, and our featured comment is from Sue, who left a comment to episode 43 of LOTRO Players News, and it is another poem called There Was a Dionai Musei Sipula, which I presume is probably the name of a specific fly. Very well, and there was a pine leaf who swallowed a fly. I don't know why he swallowed a fly. Perhaps he'll die. He swallowed a Brax wolf. This engaged socially with tables. He swallowed a Draculetta that counted, laughed, and faded out.
Ooh.
He swallowed an Etheros that asked difficult questions. He swallowed an Andang and answered difficult questions with wisdom of a flaming torch. I don't know why he swallowed the LOTRO Players news team and the fly. Perhaps he'll die. There was a pine leaf who entrapped them all, but the show was a ball. Luckily, he didn't swallow a horse, because he'd be dead, of course.
Yeah.
That is the scientific name for a Venus flytrap.
Okay, a Venus flytrap. Ah, all right. I guess that is appropriate then.
But props for knowing it was related to a fly pine leaf.
Pine Leaf knows everything.
Clearly.
Very well. And as for emails, we did not receive any, but you can contact us by emailing us at lotroplayers.mymiddleearth@gmail.com, or you could follow us on Twitter, LOTROPlayers @LOTROPlayers, Andang @PPNP_Andang, Braxwolf @Braxwolf, Draculetta @Draculetta_72, Etheros @Etheros, Lilykate @LilykateBuggins, Mystery @MysteryXOX, and Pineleaf @PineleafNeedles. And you could join us live on LOTRO Players Adventures, which goes live every Saturday at 5 p.m. server time, and LOTRO Players News that goes live every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. server time, and that is United States Eastern Time. And you can join us by going to lotroplayers.com/live, and be sure to join us in the YouTube chat. Thank you, everyone.